In this video, we're going to discuss port security. And again, like most things with the CCENT, we'll only scratch the surface of all the various port security settings that a modern Cisco switch offers. However, this video serves as a good introduction to port security. It introduces you to the port security commands and shows you a basic way of locking down the ports on your Cisco switch. So let's get started. Here we are on our switch. We are in privileged exec mode. And of course, like with all other configuration commands, we have to enter configuration mode. So we'll do config T, and then we're going to pick the interface that we're going to configure port security on. Now, if you're going to configure multiple interfaces with the same commands, you can actually use the interface range command. So you could do interface range fast Ethernet 0/1 to 48 if you wanted to. And if you do that, you'll notice that it switches to config IF range. And so any commands you type will apply to all of the interfaces immediately upon typing them. So if you're connected via Telnet and you type the shutdown command, well, you're going to be finding that switch and plugging it in with a console cable. When it comes to port level or interface level configuration commands, it's generally best to pick a small range of ports, say 1 port or 5 ports or 10 ports. Test the configuration on that. And then if that works and you're not kicked out of the switch, then let's move on and configure all the rest of the ports with it. In this case, we'll exit from interface range mode and we'll just do interface fast Ethernet 0/5. Now the first thing we have to do before we can configure port security is set the switch port mode to access. And at this point in the certification exams, you don't really know the difference between access mode and trunk mode on a switch. You will cover that in the ICND2 exam if you continue on and get your CCNA. However, for the purposes of the exam, which is what we're teaching to here, the command you need to know is switch port mode access. Once you do that, you can use the switch port command. And there's a subset of the switch port command that is, oddly enough, named port security. So you'll do switch port security, and you'll notice that there are 4 commands you can use underneath switch port security. Now, before you can use any of those commands, you have to actually enable port security just by hitting enter. Now you can configure the other aspects of port security as listed here in the help commands. So the first command we'll look at is that MAC address command. You see aging up there at the top, and we'll come back to aging once we talk about MAC address and maximum because it'll make a little more sense then. So we do switch port security MAC address and hit enter. And first off, we're presented with the option that we can configure a 48-bit MAC address. Now, when you configure a secure MAC address on a switch port, which is what you're doing with this command here, the switch port security MAC address command, what you're telling the switch is, I only want you to accept traffic from this MAC address on this port. And there's another command you have to enter to actually lock that down. But if you enter switch port security MAC address and you enter a MAC address, what you're doing is telling the switch, if you see this MAC address on any other port, just don't accept any traffic from it. Now, if you don't happen to know the MAC address, you can issue the command sticky, and it will learn the MAC addresses and put them in the running configuration for you as it learns them. I will be perfectly honest, I have only seen this used 1 time in all of the years I've been doing computer networking, and that was a core switch in a very small network where all of the servers and internet connection and so on connected to that core switch. On edge switches, it can get to be an administrative nightmare if you have to go in and change MAC addresses every time someone's computer moves or every time someone switches out their phone or their network card. It can be a pain, so most installations don't use switch port security MAC address. What does get used quite often is the switch port security maximum. And what this will allow you to do is specify the maximum number of addresses allowed on a switch port. Now, if you configure, for example, 5 MAC addresses using the switch port security MAC address command, and then you set the maximum to 8 or 9, let's go with 9 just because it's the last number I said, then that will essentially allow you to connect up to 4 more devices to that switch port other than the secure MAC addresses. So if you're going to use the secure MAC addresses, you need to set the maximum to the number of secure MAC addresses you've entered earlier in the configuration. Otherwise, people can just plug anything up into the switch port and circumvent all of your tightly locked down security. Where SwitchPort port security maximum is generally used in most installations is if you have an IP phone connected to that switch port and then you have a PC that's behind that IP phone. This will allow you to say you can't plug a hub up behind that IP phone and hook up 20 machines. You can only have 2 MAC addresses on this particular port, the phone and the PC behind that phone. We'll continue on with our discussion of port security in the next video.